Right, Eclipse builds. We're going to start off with the damage one, so if you're thinking creeping death, put it down, step away, we don't care. Eclipse builds actually have a special place in my heart. They're one of my favourite type of builds, simply just because... Somebody gave me fire! Reminds me of my NARM days. I'm joking, the closest I've got to NARM is Google Maps. I'm also just not that old, shockingly. The absolute plus side to playing Eclipse is just role-playing as a $5 hooker. And by that I mean everyone is experiencing a severe burning sensation, can't afford healthcare, and no one wants to talk about it. Eclipse is one of those incredibly underrated and understated sets in the game. It's also one of the few where the chest and backpack are absolute god tier in terms of overall capability. Eclipse is completely capable of trivializing most content, and by most content I do mean pretty much everything minus legendary, and you may or may not, depending on your playstyle and what it is you're running, have a little bit of issue with things like Warhounds and Chungers. Now annoyingly, much of this video is just going to be a repeat of this 17-minute and 49-second epic, or for a more accurate timescale, 32 wanks. Now, the first thing we need to go over with Eclipse in terms of a damage setup is the specialization. I've always seen a lot of arguing about this: firewall or technician or survivalist. Firewall, and I'll fight you for it. If your plan is to do damage with Eclipse, firewall will increase your burn duration by 30%. Oh, but what if I don't want to use fire? Well, then your only other option is to go bleed, and in terms of damage, bleed is absolutely garbage. So if you want to do damage with Eclipse, you have but one option, sadly: fire. That 30% increase in duration, because you get 2 ticks per second, will absolutely outperform Technician's 10% skill damage, which, yes, skill damage does actually affect the overall burn effect of the fire. It's something to do with the burn effect is calculated from the explosion damage from igniting either the sticky or the chem cloud, depending on how much damage the cloud does or the sticky does when exploding, which is governed by status effect, and skill damage will also then govern how much the burn will do. The next argument is then going to be survivalist, 10% amplified damage to enemies that are affected by a status. Now this does kind of make sense. You're going to be applying status to literally everything. And then in terms of total damage of what they will do per target over the complete duration, what if I told you that they both equal the exact damn bloody same? For the best results, just get someone else in your team to run survivalist. This will literally give you your best results in a group setting. So we're doing damage with Eclipse, which is what this entire video is about. Firewall is absolutely king. That solves that issue. The next thing is going to be the build. There is a lot of contention about this. However, I promise you, the best in slot is this. We have capacitor. 1, damage to armor. 2, stacking capacitor to give 60% skill damage will outperform even Scorpio. It's dumb. Everlasting Gaze is a pretty good one here, simply just because 1, the accuracy, 2, perfect perpetuation. Perfect perpetuation over normal perpetuation isn't that much of a good thing. It's just a pretty decent rifle to be able to spam headshots with, just in case you miss. It's got a pretty decent fire rate. The third on the list is going to be the double barrel shotgun that you get from Firewall, the Firestarter. The reason is this has primer rounds. Primer rounds will decrease enemies' fire resistance by 50%. This is your best bet for dealing with Chungers. It also allows you to set Warhounds on fire. Add in the fact that the flamethrower will go straight to health against Warhounds, now being able to set them on fire. Vial ticks, you can deal with Warhounds pretty damn quickly. Considering this entire build is around building status, Vial Mask is pretty much a must. For the best in slot, we have Eclipse Backpack and Chest. The chest allows for a greater range on the status transfer. It's pretty much god tier. You might notice we're not holding gloves because I'm going to go over that in a minute. And then obviously rounding out the 4-piece Eclipse, we have holster and knees. The reason I have left out the gloves, and I'm going to say aim for gloves, I actually use a holster. However, ideally you would want gloves because in certain situations you can swap the vial mask for a Golan or Wyvern piece, and then you can run BTSU gloves along with the Stinger Hive just in case you need to overcharge, but that's really the only reason. After that, your gloves, you will need them to drop like this, or instead of skill damage, maybe skill haste, but skill damage would be preferred. The reason you need them to drop like that, maybe not with the exact roll values, but you will need them to drop with skill haste and status effect, or skill damage and status effect, because you need to change the core, which on Golan is always blue. You need to change the core to yellow. For that you would have something like this. Skill tier, skill damage, status effect. This is what we call a unicorn. It is a ball ache, but it is well worth the grind. If you are unable to find a Golan piece and you're just wanting to go for it, Wyvern will be your next best option, and it is significantly easier to farm. Now, some of you might have noticed that during the build showing that I had damage to armor rolls on everything rather than damage to targets out of cover. This is not by mistake, this is completely on purpose, and it is simply just due to the fact that burn ticks will scale with damage to armor. This is why typically I would argue capacitor, because it does come with 12% damage to armor, or if you are going to run a certain build you can go with Scorpio because it does allow you to get actual higher damage, but by sacrificing the overall range and CC capabilities of the Eclipse build. That build is something along the lines of this. So we have 4-piece Eclipse still with a vial mask, but this time we have swapped out the chest. We are running Golan with status effect, skill haste, and glass cannon. We aren't going to worry about getting a skill damage roll on this because of where our damage is going to be getting amped a lot more by glass cannon. You have to be running glass cannon, by the way. But where we have sacrificed a good amount of range for the status to spread, we need more uptime on our skills to hit those wider areas, so putting an extra skill haste in there is preferable over skill damage, just simply because, well, you've got the damage anyway, glass cannon does wondrous things, but where you can't hit as much, you need to be able to throw more stickies and chems out more frequently. Now there are some other weird and wacky variations that you can do with this. I know a few people like using Memento. If you're absolutely psychotic and need therapy, you can go with Imperial Dynasty. And if you just plan on playing in groups, this does work surprisingly well. And you're going to have to excuse me because I'm about to go wash my eyes out with bleach. Running Ninja Bite Backpack still does give you 4-piece Eclipse, one with Golan, which gives you 10% status effects and 1% armor regen, and then with one Wyvern you get 10% skill damage and another 10% status effect. It is at this point where I do need to note that there is a new brand set coming out, which the first piece is 10% status effect, which means you can replace Golan with that piece, because it will be infinitely easier to farm. Have fun, good luck. Don't die. It's bad for the squirrels.